So I may have gone a little overboard for this video because I purchased every single standard focal length lens made for the Olympus half-frame Pen F series. And in this video I'm going to test which is the best through image quality, overall handling, and other factors to decide which one to keep. Before we get into it, be sure to subscribe if you're interested in half-frame photography, since I also have another video coming out on every single half-frame camera ever produced from 1913 to 2025. And that's the next video I'm making. I'm going to add chapters in this video as well, so if you're interested in a certain lens, you can skip forward to that particular section. Okay, so starting off with the 38 2.8 Pancake, the smallest one here. So if you look at this lens, it's so tiny that it's about the same thickness of a lighter. Yeah, pretty impressive. In terms of the ergonomics of it, it's a little tricky to actually engage the flanges or the release clips to get the lens off. And when you actually try and focus, sometimes you can actually kind of hit these, and the lens almost fell off on me a few times because as you're focusing past this tab, you can push down on the tab. So a little thing there, but in terms of, how small it is, it's impressive. It's really turns this into a pocket camera. So like this is something that you can, basically slip. I have a leather case on right now, but you can basically slip this into anything, any, jacket pocket or thin bag and get away with it. On the Sigma FP, it becomes quite a great little setup. And of course, half the reason that you buy these is because of those sweet lens caps. It has that very high minimum focus distance at 0.8 meters, so we're not going to get much bokeh from this, but in terms of sharpness, we can do a little test here. In terms of full frame coverage on a digital camera, it's actually quite great. There's a little bit of vignetting, and maybe if you crop in 20% or so, it'll be completely gone. But it's very usable as a 38mm f2.8 on full frame. So I'm going to be honest, I thought this was going to be hands down my favorite lens. When I first started, I got the 38 f2.8 non-Pancake and kind of learned what my limitations were with using f2.8 on film. So basically using ISO 800 with the Cinestill 800T, I learned that if I push it to 1600 and pay for that extra push in the development, then I'm basically able to get away with anything. A little limiting, but I was 100% ready to just choose this as the primary lens. But then after using it for a bit, I don't know if it's exactly the most useful lens to have. For one, the minimum focus distance really killed me, and secondly, just the difficulty with actually focusing it, changing the settings, makes it just a little less appealing to take out. And the fact that you can also get an Olympus Pen S 2.8, which is smaller and lighter than this entire setup, it just kind of diminishes from the fact that this is such a small lens. I think it's worth it if you basically only shoot during the daytime and don't mind the small controls. Then it makes it a really awesome lens. And I think image quality wise, it's great. As long as you don't want to focus up close or you don't care about crazy bokeh. It's worth saying that this is probably one of the most expensive lenses out of the 5. And that's simply because of the fact that it's really a collector's item now. So I think for someone who's interested in having a lens that retains value over time, this might be the best one, honestly. It was really difficult to find this. I think I paid 600 or a little less than 600 for this, but it was the most expensive lens out of the bunch and also the most rare. So I think from that perspective, it might be a good buy. So the f2.8 non-Pancake was the first lens for the entire system, and actually the first lens that I bought when I bought my first Olympus Pen F camera. but it's difficult to really objectively look at this without comparing it to the other two options, which are the f1.8 it's basically identical to the f1.8 weighs like like 20 grams more or something, like completely imperceptible. And comparing it to the f2.8 pancake version. Yeah, comparing it to the f2.8 pancake version. So build quality, it's pretty good. I don't have any issues with this, and I prefer the slightly larger usable focus barrel compared to the f1.8. But I think just the fact that you're limited to f2.8, it's only really worth it to buy this lens if you get it on an amazing deal, or if it's part of a package with a really good quality camera in it. I would not recommend buying this over the other two. If you're looking for just in general all-purpose lens and you're not a complete like portability or compact freak, you don't care about that much, then just get the f1.8. It's basically about the same price anyways. So moving on to the f1.8, and I think this is really the best deal that you can get for a very usable sharp lens, even wide open. So unless you want really the most out of your lens at like a low light nighttime shooting, I think this is the one to get.
You get basically all of the pros of the 38 2.8, but you get a extra couple stops of light. So I think this really strikes the balance for the best lens, and it also just feels very well balanced on the camera system itself. As we'll see in the tests that are coming next, this lens performs best for its size and weight, and really strikes the best trade-off between sharpness, image quality, handling, and overall compactness. It also shares the same minimum focusing distance as the 2.8 non-pancake and 1.4 lenses at 0.35 meters. Also, just from a minor aesthetic standpoint, I really like how the front element looks on this lens compared to the 2.8 non-pancake.
So moving on to the f1.4 lens that I have right here, this is where the decision gets really tricky because these are very similar. This is only 6 millimeters longer at 36 millimeters compared to this at 30 millimeters, the 1.8. And they're pretty close in weight too. The f1.4 weighs 164 grams compared to 138 grams. So it's almost an imperceptible difference between these two lenses. And it really comes down to how much you get out of that extra stop of light. That extra 1.4 compared to 1.8. For me personally, I think it's worth it because I do a lot of nighttime photography, almost primarily nighttime photography, and there's been a lot of times where having a 1.4 lens meant I could get away with using just the 1 second timer on the Olympus Pen camera as opposed to having to do bulb mode and try and time it manually. So for me, yeah, I think the 1.4 is definitely worth it. But as you'll see in the sharpness tests, you definitely do compromise a little bit in sharpness when you drop down to 1.4. So that's the only caveat. And I think from memory, if memory serves correctly, they are basically the same sharpness at f2 or 1.8 on the f1.8 lens and f2 on the 1.4 lens. So really, you get the same kind of performance out of the 1.4 lens that you do out of the 1.8 with just basically the same, a little bit more weight, a little bit more length. But the main thing is how much are you going to actually use that 1.4 because it is quite soft. But it has the swirly bokeh effect. So for those reasons, this is definitely my top contender. I don't need the 1.2 lens because it has the swirly bokeh and it's much, much smaller. And it offers kind of the best of both worlds for sharpening it up when you get to f2 but you can also get that really crazy effect for creative shoots. And then lastly, discussing the f1.2 lens. And this is where you can really see the difference. Compared to the f1.4 here, it is significantly heavier, 100 grams heavier. This is 264 grams, and you can really feel the density of this one. I would say this feels more almost like a smaller SLR lens, or full frame SLR lens compared to the rest of the set. So it's 264 grams compared to 164 grams on the 1.4, and it's actually a wider diameter as well. So 48 millimeter diameter for the 1.4 compared to 55 millimeter for the 1.2. Pretty significant difference. It's enough for me that it feels less like a portable kind of setup, and then this is kind of more in the realm of like a rangefinder that's just more chunky, more obvious. Obviously, it's still like probably one of the smallest 1.2 lenses ever. So, for what it does, it's pretty impressive. But in terms of using this as kind of like thinking of it as a whole system, the ergonomics of this just make it a little bit less friendly to be bringing out everywhere and stuff. So that kind of leads me back to using the 1.4 as the best all-purpose lens. The other thing with the 42 1.2 is it starts increasing even more into the telephoto range compared to the 38 millimeter. The 40 is, it's only 2 millimeter difference, so that's not as noticeable, but on this one I found myself kind of thinking of composing things a little differently because of how much more zoomed in it was at 42 millimeters. Having said that, though, this lens has the most creative effects on it, so if you're looking for something that's just super dreamy and kind of it gives a ethereal vibe, that's the one to get. So the next segment is going to be just testing all of the different lenses at different apertures, testing for the sharpness. So if you're not interested in this technical aspect of it, just skip to this timestamp on the down below that I'll post. And it's definitely worth saying that all of these lenses may have had different coatings from the time of manufacturing. So with my very small sample set, none of these conclusions should really be taken at face value, or at least you should kind of approach it with a grain of salt because the coatings may have changed over time. And of course, depending on the different various states of wear on the lenses, that could also affect these tests. But I think it's interesting nonetheless to see if there's any dramatic changes or differences between them. And you can draw some inferences from it. And I have to say, this is probably the longest video I've ever attempted to make, and the first really kind of analytical test of lenses that I've done. So there may be some mistakes and imperfections here and there, but please bear with me on this and let me know if there's anything that I missed for the next one. Okay, so on the left we have the 42 1.2, and on the right we have the 40 1.4. And right off the bat you can see just how much sharper you get when you look at the text on this battery I have here. The 40 1.4 is much sharper wide open. These are both that wide open. As far as the bokeh, it looks like I have some dirt in the 40 1.4 and a little bit less in the 42 1.2. And here you can really see the grid lights overlapping in the bokeh, more so in the wider open lens, of course. At 1.2 it's going to do more of that, but I really think it's a matter of, can you accept this not amazing sharpness for a more artistic, dreamy look. And then looking at the 42 1.2, once we start stopping it down, on the right here we are, let's see, This is at f2 on the right, and you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can see the 8 aperture blades here. You can see that it's starting to gain quite a bit of sharpness. By f4, it's honestly not amazing, but it's definitely a lot better. Like, I think this result we have here on the right for 42 at f4 matches the standard 38 1.8 wide open in terms of sharpness alone. So here we see the hexagonal bokeh balls, or I guess octagonal. And then I think, yeah, this next one at f5.6, this is where you really see the detail coming back on the 42 1.2. On the left we have the 42 1.2 at f4, and on the right at f5.6. So you can see it starts to clear up quite a bit, and then moving forward onto f8 is about where it's the sharpest. And at that point, pretty much all of these lenses will match up. f11, f16. So the differences really become what kind of performance are you looking for wide open, and how wide of an aperture do you need for creative effects. And as just another quick point of reference, here on the left now we have the 40, on the left we have the 40 1.4, and on the right we have the 42 1.2. And I just want to see how many stops down you have to go to get the same sharpness out of the 42 1.2. So here we are at 1.2, at f2, not quite, f4, almost the same, f5.6. I think actually the 1.2 is a little bit better here at 5.6. So I would say generally you're looking at stopping down to f4 to get the same sharpness from the 42 1.2 as you would from the 40 1.4 wide open, which is pretty astonishing, honestly. This really shows, how much of a better value I think the 40 1.4 is if you're looking for sharpness wide open. And here is just the grid test without anything I'm focused on at minimum focus distance. So on the left we have the 42 1.2, and on the right the 40 1.4. And as I mentioned, I clearly have some dust or other debris in my 40 1.4 causing these dust specks. But just looking at these to compare bokeh, it's pretty clear just from this left image that the 42 1.2 has quite a significant amount of distortion, and kind of that, swirly bokeh effect is a little bit more pronounced, but there's a large amount of distortion in the middle of the across the entire image, really. In terms of cat's eye bokeh, or the occlusion that you see on the edges of the lens, honestly, they look relatively similar. Just zooming in to the right here as much as possible. I would say if you're looking for that swirly bokeh effect, both will probably give you the same amount. I've done a few real life tests with this, and that's kind of what I found. The 40 1.4 definitely gives the effect. I think 42 1.2 exaggerates it a little bit, but not as much as you would expect given the wider aperture on that. So again, if you're looking for that, I don't think you need to go all the way to the 1.2 to find it. So this is the 38 1.8 at 1.8, and you can see this is the best in terms of wide open sharpness. So let's take a look and compare it to the 40 1.4 to see how much you're giving up for that extra stop. Okay, so here on the left we have the 38 1.8, and on the right the 40 1.4. And the 38 1.8 clearly is sharper wide open. So if you're looking for something where you get the nice round bokeh and the most sharpness wide open, it's a pretty safe bet that you should just go for the 38 1.8. As I'll mention later, there's very marginal difference in terms of handling and weight. So really the deciding factor comes down to cost and what you're expecting from it at its widest aperture. Just to give another point of reference, to get the same sharpness out of the 41.4, let's see how many stops we have to go. So here we are starting at 1.4 at f2. I would say it's about the same. Maybe even at f2 the 40 millimeter is sharper. And f4 definitely sharper. So in terms of comparing these two lenses, I think the 41.4 is definitely worth it for the extra stop of light, because you only have to stop down to f2 to get similar performance. If you're okay with seeing this ninja star pattern in the bokeh, then it should totally not be a problem. However, having said that, the performance of the 38 1.8 is just truly spectacular for the budget entry level. I think it might be the actual best out of all these. And in terms of just a compromise of speed, portability, balance, handling, I think this is probably the safest bet. And especially because you can usually get them for the cheapest. So let's keep looking. Just to finish this off, I'm going to cycle through the 38 1.8 at all apertures. Okay, starting now. This is, let's see. This is f2. This is f2.8. This is f4. f5.6. f8. And for another point of reference, here is the 38 1.8 with the grid light test with nothing in the foreground. 1.8, f2, 2.8, f4, 5.6, 11. So I'm going to look at the 38 2.8 OG non-pancake version here. And here it is, wide open at 2.8. Very respectable sharpness. At f4, f5.6, f8, f11, and then here is the bokeh of the 2.8. So this is at f2.8. This is at f4. This is at f5.6, f8, f11. So now this is for the 38 2.8 Pancake, which has a much farther minimum focus distance. So this is still the same test, but essentially I ran out of space for the bokeh in the background. And so you don't really get that much of an effect of it, but just testing this is wide open, and I'm getting a little pixelated when I go in here because I wasn't doing on high res on my camera, but looks pretty sharp just from comparing it to the other ones. And this is at f2.8, f4, f5.6, f8, f11, f16. So this is the bokeh without anything focused on for the 38 2.8 Pancake, 2.8, f4, f5.6, f11, f16. So I tried to exaggerate the bokeh as much as I could on the 38 2.8 Pancake, and this is what I was able to get walking all the way to the end of my apartment and trying to get it as far away as possible to get a more dramatized effect of the bokeh. And it looks fairly pleasing to my eyes. but it's not a one-to-one comparison. It definitely looks like there's some coda going on in the corners there, but my light grid was not large enough to test the full field of view on this, so I can't really say for sure. And just for reference, this is the closest thing I have to a standard lens. This is the Lumix 50mm 1.8, which I guess I need to clean due to all the dust specks. But this is just to get a point of reference for mainly onion rings and the ocular distortion cat eye effect that you get on the edges. So this is a fairly well corrected lens. And in contrast, I want to just go through and compare the opposite of well corrected. So here on the left is again the 42 1.8 wide open, and this is where you really can, this is kind of where you can see that this image is getting distorted, and what used to be considered an aberration or a flaw is now actually highly desirable because of the way that it affects everything that's not in the center of the lens. Okay, so on the left here is the 42 1.2, and on the right is my 50mm Lumix, which is the closest thing I have to a modern standard lens. And you can see how much more controlled it is on the sides in terms of ocular distortion, cat eye in the bokeh. And I guess I need to clean my Lumix lens as well, but the onion ringing is present. And yeah, I mean, I don't really see much chromatic aberration on either of these lenses, so that's good. .8 Pancake at 2.8. 2.8 Pancake at f4. 2.8 Pancake at f5.6. 2.8 Pancake at f8. 2.8 Pancake at f11. 2.8 Pancake at f16. 2.8 OG at f2.8. 2.8 OG at f4. 2.8 OG at f5.6. 2.8 OG at f8. 2.8 OG at f11. 2.8 OG at f16. 1.4 at 1.4. 1.4 at 2. 1.4 at 2.8. 1.4 at f4. 1.4 at 5.6. 1.4 at f8. 1.4 at f11. 1.4 at f16. 1.2 at 1.2. 1.2 at 2. 1.2 at 2.8. 1.2 at f5.6. 1.2 at f8. 1.2 at f11. 1.2 at f16. Okay, so now I'm going to take a look at the skin tone differences in just my YouTube studio setup here, and recorded everything wide open again, and trying to just look for, what looks like the best image in general, and if there's any differences in how it captures skin tones. And again, this was recorded on the Lumix S5 2X with the settings that I'll put up on the screen. Also, just to add, I did just a basic color correction here, converting from Vlog to Rec 709 and then adjusting exposure so that all the lenses more or less matched as best as I could do just looking at the parade scopes. Another thing to mention is I kept all the settings the same in terms of camera settings in between these to try and isolate just lens differences. Okay, so now I'm just going to create a new node and isolate the skin tones, and then use a power window here to see kind of how these all compare. And then switch to vector scope, show skin tone indicator, expand that there. So the 38 2.8 Pancake is spot on. Like that's pretty impressive. 38 2.8 Pancake is like literally, yeah, very nice skin tones coming out of that one. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, so this is 38 2.8 non-Pancake, and it looks like it's skewing a little bit to the red. I'm trying to get the same spot in my forehead. Yeah, it looks like this one is skewing a little bit reddish tones, and just to confirm that, I'm going to disable this, get rid of this, and compare the two here. So yeah, I do see a little bit more of a red tone from the, oh, let me turn on camera original here. Yeah, I am seeing a little bit of a red tone here. Slightly decent skin tones as well, but a little bit more of a red skin tone coming from the non-Pancake version, which is interesting. Okay, moving on to the 38 1.8, and for whatever reason, this one looked the best off the bat to me. This and the 40 1.4 both had just kind of an interesting look to them. But isolating these skin tones here, and then let's do it here again. So the 38 1.8 is also spot on in terms of the skin tone indicator, as I can see here. Obviously, it's a little subject to where I'm placing this power window, but this looks really impressively dead on, so nice. Good to know. Moving on to the 40 1.4, and just based on initially looking at it, it looks like it's leaning a little warm to me. I would say the two f2.8s, well, definitely the non-Pancake f2.8 is leaning a bluish tone, and then 38 1.8 is more or less neutral, and then the 40 1.4 is very much warm on the scale. So let's take a look. Yeah, so as I was predicting, this one is leaning a little bit to the yellow here. Easy to correct, but definitely good to know that this one leans a little warm, or a little yellow, so you would need to correct that for the skin tones, at least for my copy. Okay, and then moving on to the 42 1.2, and looking at this again now without the, requirement for super sharpness, like there is just that, completely dreamy look. If that's what you're going for, this is definitely the lens to get. It looks like I'm in a different apartment almost compared to the 1.8 here. So yes, this is very much a special effects type of lens that I think you would want to lean into if you do end up using it. Let's see, in terms of skin tones. So this one actually looks very spot on in terms of the skin tones as well. Yep. It's encouraging. So to recap, the lenses that perform the best in terms of capturing accurate skin tone straight out of camera, at least in my testing for my copies, again, subject to change and to the quality control at the time, and how good of a condition the lenses are. But having said that, my tests are showing that the Pancake 38 2.8, the 1.8 lens, and the 42 1.2 show the best out of camera colors, kind of true to life. With I think the 38 1.8 gives you the most neutral look. That or the 2.8 Pancake. I think that the 38 2.8 Pancake has a little less contrast. There's only so much I want to do to try and manipulate the contrast on this, but it looks like it has a little less contrast, but the colors look most true to life here in my testing. So I would say if you're looking for more of a contrasty image with true to life colors, the 38 1.8 wins, but the 38 2.8 Pancake is honestly not that far off from what I think it would look like on a modern corrected lens. So I also tested these all with kind of a traditional landscape shot, and I think this is pretty revealing in terms of color casts in a real life scenario, and then also just full frame coverage, because all of these were filmed on my full frame Sigma FP and Cinema DNG RAW. And you can see right here, I would say the 38 2.8 OG and the 38 1.8, 38 1.8 down here, and the 38 2.8 OG have the best coverage in terms of full frame. None of them are perfect, and you're going to see this vignetting on the edges, but I think that those are definitely the top ones, followed up by the Pancake version, which has vignetting but not distinct circle, and then the second to last would be the 40 1.4, where you start to see kind of a circle forming on the edges. And then the 42 1.2 up here would be the worst for full frame coverage. And as a point of reference, I did a focus rack at wide open and at all apertures actually for all these lenses. So if you're interested, you can watch this and I'll have each of them labeled, but otherwise you can skip to the next section at this time code. So starting with flaring on the f2.8, you can see that there's basically no spot flaring. There's a little bit right here, but that's kind of what we expected with the very simple design for the 38 2.8. Both Pancake and non-Pancake only have 4 elements, so you're not going to get many spot flares with such a simple lens design. We're seeing a lot of veiling flaring here when panning across the frame. And then going up and down, you can see that a little bit more. Flare. With the 2.8, with the 2.8 OG, it's pretty much the same story. Get these veiling flares. But basically no spot flaring. Moving on to the f1.8, this is where you start seeing spot flaring. The f1.8 is a 6-element lens design, so that starts making sense that you would see this here. Now, I don't have much experience with modern lenses, but these seem to be fairly well controlled. The f1.8 is a 6-element design. And then moving to the f1.4, let's just play this out. So here you can see the spot flares and the veiling flares. And then one up and down. And this was done with my Aperture 100D, just no light modifiers in front. Okay, and then here's the 42mm 1.2, having the most spot flares out of all of them. So the f1.2, looking at it, at the start of this pan, you're starting to see pretty strong veiling flares. And I think that's due to how far out the front element extends and is more exposed to light coming in from that angle. But I think that's the only one I was able to see that in. So top to bottom, and you can see right there that it has a pretty strong veiling flare. Okay, so since I had to do this as precise as I could, I used a Data Color Spider 24, I believe, the color chart checker to see what mid-gray would actually read out in terms of if it's leaning in any direction on the RGB channel. So let's take a look at that. Starting with the 38 2.8 Pancake. So the 38 2.8 Pancake is, wow, really spot on. So RGB is supposed to be 1 to 8 for all 3 values if it's like a perfectly balanced color. And right here we're getting on mid-gray is roughly almost identical. So yeah, this just confirms that the version, at least that I have, of the Pancake 38 2.8 is very well color corrected. Okay, moving on to the 38 2.8 non-Pancake. Let's take a look at this one. Okay, so I might have missed the exposure a little bit on this, but we're just looking in terms of relative values. If RGB, any of those values are too far away from each other. So for this one, it looks like it's fairly well controlled as well, which kind of confirms what we had already been seeing in the Skintone test. So this is the 38 1.8 test. And here it looks like it's a little lower on the blue. Yep. So 38 1.8 has a little less blue, leans a little warmer, as this test is showing, but not by much. And now we have the 40 1.4, and the 40 1.4 is basically what it looked like. It's leaning quite heavily on the yellow. compared to the other channels. So now we're looking at the 42 1.2. The 42 1.2 is fairly well balanced. It's a little warm, but not as much as some of the other lenses. So 42 1.2 is good. Okay, so to take a quick look at the distortion. So here we're looking for barrel and pin cushion distortion, and starting with the f2.8 Pancake. This one, for all of these, I actually cropped into APS-C mode for this, so it's like a 1.5 crop, which is what the lenses are intended for. But this 2.8 Pancake looks like surprisingly well corrected. So you can see that it's a pretty rectilinear view on these sides, which is not something that's, ridiculously impressive for the 38mm lens, but compared to the other ones, I think this one is quite good. So looking at the 2.8 non-Pancake, it's still pretty good, but you're starting to see a little bit of barrel distortion here on the edges of the frame. And then going to the f1.8, I think this is kind of similar to the f2.8 non-Pancake, but maybe a little bit more pronounced, some noticeable barrel distortion on the sides. Then moving to the f1.4, even though I didn't frame this up 100% accurately, you can see that the barrel distortion is definitely more increased in this one, which is, in some ways something that you might be looking for if you like that kind of swirly bokeh and distortion effect going on in the corners of your frame. And then lastly, the 1.2 exhibits the most barrel distortion.
And the following segment will be for focus breathing. I tried my best to
isolate the focus breathing, but this is just based on like a scene in my house, so it's not really scientific or anything, but for what it's worth, it's interesting to see. 2.8 Pancake Focus Rack. .8 non-Pancake Focus Rack. 1.8 Focus Rack. Focus breathing. .4 Focus Breathing. .2 Focus Breathing.
So to wrap all this up, in conclusion, what I think are kind of the best different categories to rank these lenses in are best value, best for gaining value, and then best for low light or night shooting. And the first one is pretty clear. Best value goes to the 38 1.8 because it has the same price as the other ones that are 38 2.8 and both Pancake and the OG, but actually it's probably the cheapest one in comparison to all those. But the thing is, it's actually sharp wide open, and you can use that 1.8 at whatever aperture you want. 1.8 is still the sharpest across the board for all the lenses wide open. Then the next, I would say, the most collectible, so to speak, item or lens of this list is the 38 2.8 Pancake. These are incredibly rare, like I said earlier, and I think this is the one to get if you're looking to just get something that will for sure not lose value over time. I mean, maybe it will, but is the least likely to, just due to its scarcity and due to the fact that there's just not many Pancake lenses that are this small. APS-C is still a very, widely used format for digital cameras. So having this very tiny APS-C lens that you can mount on modern cameras with focus peaking just makes it really a pretty cool thing. And I think it's not going to lose any relevancy moving forward. So I would say that's the best one to get if you're looking at something that's going to gain value or hold value over time. And then the last one, best for low light, I'm going to give this one to that 40mm f1.4. For the reasons I discussed previously, and the sharpness test particularly, the f1.2 lens is just not very usable, and you're sacrificing a ton of weight and size just to get that lower light. But it's not even usable unless you really embrace the creative, blurry aspect of it. So for those reasons, the 40mm 1.4 is the one I give for low light performance. And for what I'm going to do, I think I'm actually going to keep the 40mm 1.4 and 38mm 1.8 for the time being, because I just can't decide which one to keep overall. They're both really great at what their intended uses are, so I think I need to just use it a little bit more and see if I'm okay to push film maybe to keep the 1.8 lens and just embrace pushing film. But at the same time, that 40mm lens just has such a cool swirly bokeh effect that I think that's probably the one I'm leaning towards right now. It's the 40mm 1.4, because it's like the 38mm plus another creative mode that you unlock with that extra stop of light and bending the frame and getting all that distortion. So I would say that's where I'm leaning, but I'm not sure yet. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.